The bedroom smelled like expensive cologne and fresh ego as Colonel Adebayo stuffed Morenike's clothes into black trash bags like they were spoiled food. A silk shirt clung to his shoulders, shiny and loud, the kind of shirt men wear when they want the world to know they're winning. Morenike stood by the doorway, quiet, barefoot on clean tiles, her hands trembling, not from fear of him, but from the shock of how fast love can turn into a transaction. On the bed, suitcases lay open, jewelry boxes dumped, hangers snapped. The entire room looked like a life being erased. Colonel kept packing with the calm cruelty of someone who had already replaced her in his mind. He had just secured a $95 million deal, the kind of money that turns men into gods in their own heads. And tonight, he decided a soft wife didn't match the new image. He told her she had until morning and that the locks would change by noon. Morenike didn't beg. She didn't scream. She just stared at the garbage bags and felt something click inside her chest, because Colonel thought he was throwing away weakness, without knowing he was throwing away the final signature that could either release his fortune or bury it. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from: Lagos, Accra, London, maybe New York or Toronto. We want to know. The restaurant smelled like old money and new arrogance. Morenike sat at the far end of the table at Cilantro, one of Abuja's most exclusive dining spots, where reservations required connections and every table whispered of oil deals, political appointments, and generational wealth. The chandeliers cast warm light over faces that had never known struggle, and tonight Colonel Adebayo fit right in. He sat at the head of the table in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, his smile wide and easy as he held court over 8 guests who hung on his every word. 95 million, Colonel announced for the 3rd time that evening, letting the number hang in the air like expensive cologne. Infrastructure development across 3 states. International backing. This is legacy money, people. This is generational wealth. Applause rippled around the table. Glasses clinked. Morenike sipped her water and said nothing. She'd heard the number before, of course. She'd heard it at home, when Colonel first received the provisional agreement. She'd heard it during his phone calls with investors, during his Instagram live celebration, during every conversation for the past 2 weeks. What she hadn't heard was any mention of the compliance requirements, the oversight structures, or the final approval signatures still outstanding. But Colonel didn't want to hear about those details. He wanted to celebrate. "And this is my wife, Morenike," Colonel said when someone asked, gesturing vaguely in her direction like she was furniture. "She's not really a business person. She does legal work, compliance stuff. Very technical, very boring." He laughed, and the table laughed with him. "But she supports me, don't you, baby?" Morenike smiled, the kind of smile she'd perfected over 12 years of marriage. Polite. Appropriate. Empty. "I do what I can," she said quietly. "She's modest," Colonel continued, already turning away from her. "But really, she's just happy to be here." Across the table, Laura Mensa leaned forward, her burgundy dress cut low enough to be memorable, but high enough to maintain plausible deniability. She was younger than Morenike by perhaps 8 years, lighter-skinned, with Brazilian hair that cascaded over one shoulder and makeup applied with professional precision. She worked in investor relations or marketing, or something equally vague that seemed to require constant proximity to wealthy men. "Colonel, you're too humble," Laura purred, touching his arm with familiarity that made Morenike's jaw tighten. "This deal is brilliant. Visionary. You're not just building infrastructure, you're building your empire." Colonel beamed. Exactly. You get it, Laura. That's why I value your perspective." Morenike watched her husband light up under Lara's attention, watched him lean closer when she spoke, watched him laugh louder at her jokes. She watched Lara's hand linger on his sleeve, watched the way her eyes never left his face, watched the performance of seduction happening in real time across a table full of witnesses who either didn't notice or didn't care. "Morenike, you must be so proud," Laura said suddenly, turning those carefully lined eyes toward her. The words were kind. The tone was not. I am, Morenike replied. Though I hope all the paperwork is properly finalized. These international deals can be complex. Connell's smile tightened. Everything's handled. Stop worrying about technicalities. Technicalities keep deals from collapsing, Morenike said gently. And negativity keeps us from celebrating, Connell shot back. Can you just be happy for me? For once. The table fell silent. Morenike felt 8 pairs of eyes on her, judging, measuring, finding her lacking. The quiet wife who couldn't even celebrate properly. The technical woman who brought paperwork to parties. The obstacle to her husband's joy. Of course, Morenike said softly. Congratulations, Connell. He turned away, back to Lara, back to the applause, back to a future where Morenike was increasingly invisible. And as the dinner continued, as champagne flowed and toasts were made and Connell's hand found Lara's under the table, Morenike sat in her expensive dress in her assigned seat and felt herself disappearing. Not because she was weak, but because Connell had decided she didn't matter anymore. He had no idea that the woman he was erasing from his celebration was the only person who could make his 95 million dreams come true. Or destroy them completely. The drive home from Cilantro was silent except for the hum of the Range Rover's engine and Connell's heavy breathing. Morenike could feel the anger radiating off him in waves, thick and suffocating in the enclosed space. She'd embarrassed him, apparently, by mentioning paperwork. She'd dampened his celebration by being concerned instead of celebratory. She'd committed the unforgivable sin of thinking instead of applauding. They pulled into the circular driveway of their home in Maitama, all glass and steel and architectural statements. 2 years ago, Connell had insisted on the upgrade. We need to look the part, he'd said. Morenike had signed the papers, transferred funds from her trust account to make the down payment possible, and never mentioned it again. That was her role. Silent support. Invisible infrastructure. Connell slammed the car door and strode into the house without waiting for her. By the time Morenike entered, he was already in their bedroom, pulling her clothes from the walk-in closet with violent efficiency. What are you doing? Her voice was calm despite the confusion racing through her mind. What I should have done months ago. Connell didn't look at her. He yanked dresses off hangers, tossed shoes into a growing pile on the marble floor. You're holding me back, Morenike. You're anchoring me to mediocrity with your constant worry and your boring technicalities and your complete inability to match my energy.
Connell, stop.
Let's talk about this. I'm done talking. He grabbed a suitcase from the top shelf, threw it onto the bed. I'm done explaining myself to someone who doesn't understand ambition. I'm done being married to a woman who brings nothing to the table except caution and compliance documents. Morenike stood frozen in the doorway, watching 12 years of marriage being stuffed into luggage like garbage. Her wedding dress, still in its preservation box. The jewelry he'd given her on anniversaries. Her certificates and awards, meaningless to him now. Everything that marked her presence in this house, erased with mechanical precision. This is about Lara, she said quietly. This is about me finally realizing I deserve better. Connell zipped a suitcase closed with force. Lara understands success. She celebrates achievement instead of questioning it. She elevates me instead of dragging me down with pessimism. I've supported every decision you've made. You've questioned every decision I've made. There's a difference. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm having the locks changed tomorrow at noon. You have until morning to get your things and leave. The words landed like physical blows. Morenike felt her legs weaken, but she didn't move.
Didn't cry.
Didn't beg. Something inside her had clicked into place during dinner, watching Connell preen under Lara's attention, and now it solidified into something harder.
Colder. Clearer.
You're making a mistake, she said. The only mistake I made was staying this long. Connell finally looked at her, and his eyes were those of a stranger. You're not the woman I need anymore, Morenike. Maybe you never were. I just couldn't see it until I got to this level. This level, she repeated softly. You mean the 95 million you haven't actually secured yet?
His jaw tightened.
It's secured. The contract is signed. The contract has conditions. You'd know that if you'd read past the dollar amount. Get out. His voice was low, dangerous. Take your bags and your negativity and get out of my house. Our house, she corrected. My down payment. My name on the deed. My income. My house. He stepped toward her, not threatening but dismissive. Final. You can stay at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow, find somewhere permanent. File for divorce if you want. My lawyers will handle it. But you're done living off my success. Morenike looked at him for a long moment. The man she'd married, supported, believed in. The man who'd promised partnership and delivered patronization. The man who thought throwing her out was an ending when it was actually the beginning of his reckoning. I'll be gone by morning, she said with a dignity that surprised even herself. She gathered what she could carry, left what she couldn't, and walked out of the bedroom with her head high. Behind her, she heard Connell's phone ring, heard him answer with a warmth he hadn't shown her in months. Lara, baby. It's done. She's leaving. Morenike closed the front door quietly behind her and stood in the driveway under Abuja's night sky. She had nowhere to go, very little cash, and a husband who'd just thrown away their marriage like it meant nothing. But she also had something Connell didn't know about. Something he'd never bothered to ask about. Something that made his $95 million celebration dangerously premature. She pulled out her phone and made a call.
Mama Ejiro?
It's Morenike. Is my mother's house still available? The bungalow in Guarimpa smelled like memory and loss. Morenike stood in the doorway at 2 a.m, her suitcases at her feet, and felt the weight of everything crash down at once. This was her mother's house, left to her 3 years ago when breast cancer had taken the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 2 jobs to put her through university, who never stopped believing her daughter was destined for greatness. Look at me now, Mama, Morenike whispered to the empty rooms. So great I'm homeless at 42. The house was small but immaculate. Mama Ejiro, the neighbor who'd been keeping watch, had maintained it perfectly. Clean floors, dust-free surfaces, curtains that still smelled faintly of the lavender water her mother used to spray every Sunday. Morenike had kept meaning to sell it, but something always stopped her. Connell had called it sentiment. Now she realized it was survival instinct. She dropped her bags in the small living room and sank onto the threadbare sofa. Everything hurt. Her pride, her heart, her certainty about who she was and what her life meant. For 12 years, she'd built her identity around being Connell's wife, his partner, his support system. And in one night, he dismantled all of it like she was nothing. Sleep was impossible. At 4 a.m, Morenike found herself wandering through the house, touching things her mother had touched, seeking comfort in the familiar. She ended up in the small second bedroom that her mother had used as an office, a space filled with filing cabinets and careful record-keeping from a woman who'd learned early that documentation was survival. Morenike opened a drawer almost absently, not looking for anything in particular, just needing to feel connected to something solid. Inside were files organized with her mother's meticulous handwriting. Household bills, medical records, property documents. And then, in the back, a folder labeled Morenike's Work, 2018 to 2022. She pulled it out, confused. Inside were copies of documents she'd created years ago when Connell's business was smaller and more precarious. Legal structures she designed. Trust frameworks she'd established. Compliance pipelines she'd built to protect both of them when his dealings with international partners first began. She'd been so careful back then, so thorough, creating safeguards that would ensure any major deal required proper oversight, proper approvals, proper accountability. Connell had signed everything she'd put in front of him without reading it. "You handle the boring stuff, baby," he'd said. "I trust you." Morenike's hands trembled as she flipped through page after page. Here was the corporate structure she'd designed. Here was the trust arrangement that held their business interests. Here was the authorization framework that required her signature on any international contract exceeding 50 million naira. She'd created it to protect them both, to ensure transparency, to prevent exactly the kind of reckless celebrating Connell was currently doing. And then she found it. The document that changed everything. International Development Partnership Oversight Protocol. The header read, dated 4 years ago. Signed by Connell, without reading. The protocol required that any international infrastructure deal required 3 signatures: the primary contractor, the funding partner, and the designated compliance officer with fiduciary authority. The designated compliance officer was Dr. Morenike Adebayo, listed under her maiden name and professional credentials. The name she'd maintained for legal work even after marriage. The name Connell never paid attention to because he'd stopped seeing her as a professional years ago. Morenike read the document 3 times, her heart hammering. Then she opened her laptop, logged into the encrypted server where she maintained her professional files, and searched for anything related to Connell's recent deal. It took 20 minutes of searching, but she found it. An email from Blackwood International Development Partners, sent to her professional address 2 weeks ago.
Dr.
Adebayo, we are finalizing the documentation for the Nigerian Infrastructure Initiative, Contract NII 2024-095. As designated oversight authority per the 2020 protocols, your signature is required to release funding. Please confirm your availability for final review and approval. Timeline: December 18th deadline. December 18th. 5 days from now. Morenike sat back, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. Connell thought his deal was complete. He'd signed contracts, celebrated publicly, thrown her out, and started planning his new life with Laura. But none of it was real yet. None of it was final. Because the one signature that actually mattered, the one that would release his 95 million naira, belonged to the woman he'd just thrown away like garbage. She looked around her mother's modest house, at the life she'd built quietly while Connell chased status, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not revenge, exactly. Something clearer than that. Justice. Accountability. The natural consequence of underestimating the person who'd been protecting you all along. Morenike pulled out her phone and typed a response to Blackwood International. Confirmed. I'll be available for final review. Please send all contract documentation for compliance assessment. Dr. M. Adebayo, Oversight Authority. She pressed send and waited for dawn. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of her mother's bungalow as Morenike sat at the small dining table, her laptop open, her second cup of instant coffee growing cold beside her. She'd been reading for 3 hours straight, and with each page, Connell's arrogance became more catastrophic. The email from Blackwood International had included a secure link to the full contract documentation. 247 pages of dense legal language, financial projections, construction timelines, and compliance requirements. Morenike read every single word, her legal training kicking in automatically, highlighting inconsistencies, flagging concerns, noting the gaps between what Connell thought he'd signed and what he'd actually committed to. Section 7, subsection C, was particularly enlightening. All funding disbursements are contingent upon written approval from the designated oversight authority as established in the 2020 International Development Partnership Oversight Protocol. No fund shall be released, no contract shall be executed, and no construction shall commence without explicit written consent from Dr. M. Adebayo or her authorized successor. This requirement is non-negotiable and cannot be waived by any party. Morenike read it 3 times, then checked the signature page at the end of the document. There was Connell's signature, bold and confident, dated 2 weeks ago. Right above a clearly marked line that read, pending final approval, Dr. M. Adebayo, Compliance Oversight Authority. He hadn't read it. Obviously hadn't read it. Had probably flipped straight to the dollar amount, seen 95 million, and signed wherever his lawyer pointed without bothering to understand what he was actually agreeing to. This was Connell's pattern. Rush toward the money, ignore the details, assume everything would work itself out because it always had before. Except this time, the detail he'd ignored was his wife.
Her phone rang.
An unfamiliar number with a Lagos prefix. She answered cautiously. Dr. Adebayo? This is Jennifer Okonkwo from Blackwood International Development Partners. I'm the project coordinator for the Nigerian Infrastructure Initiative. I wanted to reach out personally regarding the final approval meeting. Morenike's voice was steady, professional. Good morning, Jennifer. I received the documentation. I'm reviewing it now. Wonderful. We're scheduled for final signatures on December 18th at our Abuja office. Mr. Adebayo will be present, of course, along with our executive team. We're very excited to move forward with this project. Your compliance work on the preliminary frameworks was exceptional, by the way. Very thorough. Thank you. I take my oversight responsibilities seriously. We appreciate that. These international partnerships require careful attention to detail, especially given the scale of investment and community impact. Mr. Adebayo seems very confident everything will proceed smoothly. Morenike's jaw tightened. Does he? Oh yes. He's been quite vocal about his timeline expectations. In fact, he's already released some public statements about the project moving forward. I assume you've coordinated with him on the approval process? Mr. Adebayo and I have different communication styles, Morenike said carefully. I prefer to complete my due diligence before making commitments. There was a pause on the other end. Of course. That's exactly why we have oversight requirements. Too many contractors treat these deals as purely transactional. We need partners who understand the broader implications. Speaking of which, Morenike said, pulling up another section of the contract, I have some questions about the financial projections in Section 12. The profit margins seem unusually high for this type of infrastructure development. She heard paper shuffling. You're referring to the contractor compensation structure?
Yes.
The standard industry rate for the scope of work would be approximately 40 to 50 million naira in contractor profit. This contract allocates 95 million to Mr. Adebayo's firm. That's nearly double. Another pause, longer this time. That was negotiated directly with Mr. Adebayo. He presented it as necessary for attracting top-tier construction capacity. I see. And the community benefit allocation. It's outlined in Section 15. Approximately 12 million naira for community programming, job training, local business development. Morenike did the math quickly. Kunal was taking 95 million. The actual community receiving 12 million. For a project that was supposed to be about infrastructure development and social impact. Jennifer, I'm going to need additional time to review these financial structures. The ratio of contractor profit to community benefit doesn't align with Blackwood's stated mission. Dr. Adebayo, I understand your concern, and frankly, several of us here share it. But Mr. Adebayo was very insistent during negotiations. He implied that without his firm's involvement, the project couldn't move forward. He implied incorrectly. There are multiple qualified contractors in Nigeria. That's what I thought. Jennifer's voice carried relief, like she'd been waiting for someone with authority to say it out loud. Look, between us, some of the leadership team has concerns about Mr. Adebayo's approach. He's very focused on personal gain, less interested in the community impact aspects. But he signed the contract, and we assumed his oversight authority would ensure proper accountability. His oversight authority, Morenike repeated. You mean me?
Yes, exactly.
Your signature is what makes this deal legitimate. Without your approval, Mr. Adebayo's contract is just paper. Morenike sat back, the full picture crystallizing. Kunal had negotiated an inflated, self-serving deal, celebrated like it was complete, thrown her out of their home, and had no idea that his 95 million depended entirely on the woman he'd just discarded. Jennifer, I'll complete my review by December 17th. But I want you to know that I take my fiduciary responsibilities seriously. If this contract doesn't serve the community it's supposed to benefit, I won't sign it. Understood. And Dr. Adebayo? Thank you. We need more people like you in these partnerships. After they hung up, Morenike returned to the contract, reading with new purpose. Not just looking for what was there, but for what was missing. What Kunal had overlooked. What vulnerabilities existed in a deal built on greed instead of partnership. By noon, she'd found 3 major issues. By evening, she had a plan. Connell's Instagram story was a masterclass in premature celebration. Morenike sat in her mother's bungalow, scrolling through post after post, watching her husband's public unraveling in real time. A photo of a brand new Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, black and gleaming, with the caption "Level Up SCN. When you sign the deals, you drive the feels." 3 fire emojis. 247 likes in 20 minutes. The next story showed Laura draped across the hood in a dress that cost more than most people's rent, her smile wide and possessive. "My king deserves the best," the text overlay read, with a crown emoji. Connell had reposted it to his own account. Morenike's phone buzzed. A text from her friend Bimp, who still followed Connell's social media despite Morenike's protests. "Girl, are you seeing this? He's lost his entire mind." Another buzz. A screenshot from Lara's Instagram. A Cartier bag, red leather, unmistakable. "When he treats you like the queen you are." Hashtag blessed. Hashtag Numiworth. Hashtag upgraded life. Morenike closed Instagram before she threw her phone across the room. But curiosity was a terrible thing, and an hour later she was back, scrolling through Connell's feed like watching a car crash in slow motion. There was a video now. Connell at a club, bottle service, sparklers, a crowd of people who hadn't been at their wedding but suddenly wanted to be in his presence. He was shouting over the music, drunk on champagne and ego. 95 million, baby. This is just the beginning. We're talking legacy. We're talking empire. Laura was beside him, her arm around his waist, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh and pull her closer. The video ended with him kissing, unapologetic and public. The comments were predictable. "Boss moves. This is how you win." Inspiration. And buried in the middle, from someone with the username @concernedlegal07, a simple question. Has the contract been finalized and approved? Connell had responded within minutes. "Everything's locked in. Just waiting on paperwork." Formality. Formality. Morenike almost laughed.
Her phone rang.
Jennifer from Blackwood International again. "Dr. Adebayo, I'm calling because we've received several messages from Mr. Connell Adebayo requesting we expedite the approval process. He's asking us to bypass standard review procedures and release funds immediately based on his signed contract." On what grounds? He claims there are time-sensitive construction opportunities and that delays will cost the project money. He's also implying that oversight review is unnecessary bureaucracy. Morenike's grip tightened on her phone. "And what did you tell him?" "That our protocols exist for a reason and that we don't bypass compliance requirements regardless of contractor pressure." But Dr. Adebayo, he's becoming quite insistent. He's called 4 times today. His tone is becoming aggressive. Aggressive how? He's threatening to walk away from the deal if we don't process his funding request immediately. He's also suggesting that he has other international partners who would be more flexible. Empty threats from a desperate man. Morenike had heard Connell bluff his way through negotiations before. The difference was she'd always been there to clean up the mess afterward. This time, she was the mess he'd created. "Jennifer, hold to your protocols. Mr. Adebayo can make whatever threats he wants, but without my approval signature, he has no deal to walk away from." "That's what I thought. Thank you for confirming." Jennifer paused. "Dr. Adebayo, if I may ask, is everything all right?" "Mr. Adebayo seems unaware that you're the approval authority. He keeps referring to you as a processing administrator, not the decision maker." Of course he did. Because that's how Connell saw her. Administrative.
Background.
Unimportant. "Everything is fine, Jennifer. I'll have my compliance review completed by our meeting date. Tell Mr. Adebayo that if he continues to pressure Blackwood staff, it will be noted in my assessment." After the call ended, Morenike returned to Instagram. Connell had posted again. A photo of him and Laura at a high-end restaurant, champagne flutes raised. "Celebrating with my real one. The woman who sees my vision and elevates it. Partnership is everything." The irony was so thick Morenike could taste it. Another post appeared minutes later. A Rolex rose gold, sitting on Connell's wrist. "When you're operating at this level, time moves different." Bimp texted again. "He got an advance, didn't he?" He's spending money he doesn't actually have yet. That was exactly what he was doing. Morenike pulled up the contract again, found Section 23, Advance Payment Terms. Blackwood had released 2 million naira as a good faith advance upon initial contract signing, to be deducted from final payment upon completion of all approval requirements. 2 million naira that Kunal was currently burning through on cars and jewelry and bottle service, and a woman who loved him for his balance sheet. 2 million naira he'd have to return if the deal collapsed. Morenike did some quick mental math. The G-Wagon was at least 40 million naira. The Rolex, another 5 million. The gifts for Lara, the restaurants, the parties, probably another 10 million spent or committed. And then there were the house renovations he'd mentioned. The contractors he'd already hired. Kunal had spent or obligated nearly 60 million naira based on a deal that didn't exist yet. Based on money he didn't have. Based on an approval he'd never secured. Her phone lit up with a new Instagram notification. Lara had gone live. Against her better judgment, Morenike clicked. Lara was in what looked like a jewelry store, trying on diamond necklaces, narrating to her followers. When your man says pick whatever you want because money isn't an object anymore. She giggled, holding up a piece that probably cost 8 million naira. This is what happens when you align with a real provider. A real visionary. Ladies, stop settling for men who can't match your standards. The live continued for 10 excruciating minutes. Lara trying on pieces. Kunal's voice off camera, indulgent and proud. Get whatever makes you happy, baby. The sales associate wrapping multiple items. Lara blowing a kiss to the camera. Secured the bag and the man. Life is good when you know your worth. Morenike closed the app and sat in the silence of her mother's house. Outside, Abuja's evening traffic hummed. Inside, the weight of what was coming settled over her like inevitability. Kunal was spending. Lara was encouraging. And neither of them had any idea that the foundation of their celebration was built on sand. 3 more days until the approval meeting. 3 more days until Kunal learned what formality actually meant. The third night in her mother's bungalow, Morenike couldn't sleep. Something about the contract numbers didn't sit right, the kind of intuition that came from years of reading fine print and catching the lies people buried in professional language. She made another cup of coffee at midnight and opened her laptop, this time digging deeper than the main contract into the supporting documentation Blackwood had provided. The subcontractor list was in Appendix D, 27 companies supposedly vetted and approved for various aspects of the infrastructure project. Construction firms, engineering consultants, materials suppliers, logistics coordinators. Morenike started with the largest allocation, a company called Prestige Infrastructure Limited, assigned 42 million naira for primary construction management. She typed the company name into the Corporate Affairs Commission database. The registration came up immediately, but something was wrong. Prestige Infrastructure Limited had been incorporated 8 months ago. The listed director was someone named Chidi Okonkwo. The registered address was a residential apartment in Lekki. An 8-month-old company with a residential address was managing 42 million naira in infrastructure development. Morenike kept digging. Prestige Infrastructure had no website, no project history, no public record of completed work. But the name Chidi Okonkwo triggered something in her memory. She'd heard it before, in a different context. She opened her professional network files, searched through compliance alerts from the past 2 years.
There.
A bulletin from the Nigerian Institute of Builders, dated 14 months ago. Chidi Okonkwo had been sanctioned for contract misrepresentation on a government project in Rivers State. Substandard materials, falsified inspection reports, diverted funds. The project had collapsed, and Okonkwo had quietly dissolved his previous company and disappeared. Now he was back, with a new company name and a 42 million naira allocation from Kunal's deal. Morenike's hands shook as she typed. She cross-referenced every subcontractor on Kunal's list against public records, business registrations, and professional databases. What she found made her stomach turn. 9 of the 27 companies were less than a year old. 6 had residential addresses. 4 had directors with histories of contract failures or ethical violations. 3 were registered to the same business address in a strip mall in Abuja, suggesting they were shell companies. And all of them, every single one, had been personally selected and approved by Colonel Adebayo. She pulled up the budget allocation spreadsheet. The numbers Colonel had submitted to Blackwood showed detailed cost projections for materials, labor, equipment, permits, and community programming. Everything looked professional, justified, reasonable. But when Morenike started checking the line items against actual market rates, the inflation became obvious. Cement costs were marked up by 30%. Steel reinforcement bars by 40%. Heavy equipment rental rates were double the going market rate. Labor costs were inflated by 50% across the board. Someone had taken real numbers and systematically increased them, pocketing the difference through the network of questionable subcontractors. That someone was her husband. Morenike sat back, the full picture emerging with sickening clarity. This wasn't just an inflated profit margin. This was systematic fraud. Colonel had structured the entire deal to funnel money through shell companies and questionable contractors, all of whom would kick back portions to him under the table. The $95 million he'd negotiated wasn't his only payday. It was just the visible one. The actual construction work, if it happened at all, would be done with substandard materials by unqualified contractors. The community center would have cracks in the foundation within months. The affordable housing would be neither affordable nor safe. The job training programs would exist on paper only. And if Morenike signed the approval, she'd be complicit. Her signature would authorize the release of funds that would be stolen, diverted, and wasted while a community that desperately needed real infrastructure got broken promises and dangerous buildings. She opened her email and started typing to Jennifer. I've completed my preliminary compliance review and identified significant concerns regarding subcontractor qualifications and budget allocation integrity. I'm requesting a 48-hour extension to complete additional due diligence before the approval meeting. Attached is a preliminary findings report for your review. She attached a 12-page document outlining every irregularity she'd found, every questionable contractor, every inflated cost. Her mother had taught her to document everything. Tonight, that lesson might save lives. Jennifer responded within an hour, even though it was past 1 a.m. Dr. Adebayo, thank you for this thorough review. I've forwarded your findings to our executive team and our legal counsel. This is exactly the kind of oversight we need. We're scheduling an emergency internal review meeting tomorrow. I'll be in touch regarding next steps. Morenike closed her laptop and looked around her mother's modest house. The walls were thin, the furniture old, but everything here was honest. Built with integrity. Maintained with care. Colonel was building an empire on lies, and he'd expected her to sign off on it without question because that's what she'd always done. Support without scrutiny. Partnership without power. But he'd thrown her out. Called her work meaningless. Dismissed her concerns as negativity. And in doing so, he'd freed her to do what she'd always been too loyal to do before. Tell the truth. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dr. Adebayo, this is Colonel. Jennifer tells me you're delaying the approval. This is unacceptable. We have a timeline. I don't know what game you're playing, but you're jeopardizing the entire project. Call me immediately. Morenike read the text twice, then blocked the number. She didn't owe Colonel an explanation. She owed the community an honest assessment. And that's exactly what they were going to get. The call started at 7 a.m. on December 17th, one day before the approval meeting. Morenike's phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize, then another, then 3 more in succession. She let them all go to voicemail while she made breakfast in her mother's small kitchen, scrambled eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard but filled the hollow space in her stomach. The first voicemail was from a lawyer. Dr. Adebayo. This is Barrister Emeka Nwosu from Nwosu and Partners. I represent Mr. Colonel Adebayo in matters related to the Nigerian Infrastructure Initiative contract. We need to discuss your delay in processing the required approval documentation. Please return this call as a matter of urgency. The second was Colonel himself, his voice tight, with barely controlled anger. Morenike, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're embarrassing yourself and damaging my business reputation. Jennifer says you're questioning my subcontractors? My budget? Do you have any idea how much work went into structuring this deal? Call me back now. The third was Laura, surprisingly. Her voice was sugar-sweet and condescending. Hi Morenike, it's Laura Mensa. Connell mentioned you're having some concerns about the project approval. I work in investor relations, so I understand these processes can be confusing for people who aren't familiar with high-level international deals. Maybe I could help walk you through why everything is perfectly fine. We really need to move forward. Connell's under a lot of pressure, and you delaying things isn't helping anyone. Morenike deleted all three without responding. By noon, her email inbox had 17 new messages. Lawyers, contractors, people claiming to represent community stakeholders, all with the same basic message. Sign the approval, stop asking questions, let the deal move forward. Some were professionally threatening. Others were personally insulting. One suggested she was motivated by bitterness over her failed marriage. She forwarded them all to Jennifer with a simple note, documenting pressure tactics for the record. Jennifer replied immediately. This is completely inappropriate. Our legal team is addressing it. Please ignore all communications except from official Blackwood channels. Your integrity is exactly why you're the oversight authority. At 3 in the afternoon, someone knocked on her mother's front door. Morenike looked through the window first, a habit from years of living in Nigeria where unexpected visitors could mean anything. A man in an expensive suit stood on the small porch, holding a briefcase that probably cost more than her mother's monthly pension used to be. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Dr. Adebayo? I'm Kenneth Adelik, senior partner at Adelik & Associates. I represent several of the subcontractors on the Nigerian Infrastructure Initiative project. May I have a moment of your time? No, thank you. I understand you have concerns about some of the companies involved. I'd like to assure you that all contractors are fully qualified and properly registered. Perhaps if we could discuss your specific concerns, we could address them before tomorrow's meeting. My concerns are documented in my report to Blackwood International. If your clients have responses, they can submit them through proper channels. Kenneth's professional smile tightened.
Dr.
Adebayo, with respect, you're holding up a 95 million naira deal over what appears to be administrative technicalities. These contractors have families, employees, commitments based on this project moving forward. Your delay is causing real harm. Signing off on fraud would cause more harm. Good afternoon, barrister. She closed the door in his face and watched through the window as he stood there for a moment, surprised, before walking back to a black Mercedes parked on the street. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized. Bimp, her friend. Des, what is happening? I just got a call from someone asking questions about you. About your work. About whether you are qualified to assess construction contracts. Who called you? Wouldn't give a name. Just said they were doing due diligence on oversight personnel. It felt like intimidation, honestly. Like they were trying to find dirt on you. They won't find any. I know that, but girl, what have you gotten yourself into? The rumors are flying. People are saying you're sabotaging Connell's deal out of revenge. That you're bitter about the divorce and using your position to hurt him. Morenike sat down heavily on her mother's sofa. Is that what people think? It's what people are being told. Connell's been talking to everyone. He's painting himself as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife who can't handle his success. And what do you think? Bimp was quiet for a moment. I think you're the most ethical person I know. I think if you're holding up this deal, there's a damn good reason. And I think Connell is terrified because for once in his life, he can't charm or buy or bully his way out of accountability. Thank you. Do you need anything? Legal support? A witness? Someone to come stay with you.
I've fine.
Tomorrow at 10, this all gets resolved, one way or another. After Bimp hung up, Morenike sat in the silence of her mother's house and felt the weight of what she was about to do. Tomorrow, she would walk into that boardroom and face Connell, face his lawyers, face his anger and his accusations and his narrative that she was nothing but a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. And she would tell the truth anyway. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Cunnel. Last chance, Morenike. Sign the approval tomorrow, or I will destroy you. I will make sure everyone knows you sabotaged this deal. I will sue you for damages. I will ensure you never work in Nigeria again. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Morenike read the text twice, then typed a single sentence in response. See you tomorrow at 10. She pressed send and turned off her phone. Outside, the sun was setting over Abuja, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring reckoning. Tonight brought peace. The Blackwood International boardroom was all glass and steel and uncomfortable silence. Morenike arrived at 9:45, 15 minutes early, wearing a navy blue suit her mother had bought her when she graduated with her doctorate. Simple, professional, unshakable. Jennifer met her in the lobby with a warm handshake and eyes that carried apology for everything Morenike had endured over the past 3 days. He doesn't know you're coming, Jennifer said quietly as they rode the elevator to the 14th floor. He thinks this is a routine finalization meeting. Good. The boardroom overlooked Abuja's business district, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city that looked clean and modern and full of promise. Around the long table sat 5 people from Blackwood's executive team, including their CEO, David Blackwood himself, a British-Nigerian man in his 60s whose reputation for integrity was legendary. 2 lawyers flanked him, their expressions professionally neutral. Morenike took a seat at the far end of the table, her laptop and files organized in front of her. She looked calm. She felt like lightning. At exactly 10 o'clock, Cunnel walked in. He looked good, which annoyed her. New suit, probably Italian, the Rolex catching light as he moved. His confidence filled the room before he did, all swagger and certainty. Laura walked in behind him, uninvited but present, wearing a cream dress that was far too informal for a business meeting. She looked around the boardroom like she was mentally redecorating it. Cunnel's eyes swept the table, landing on David Blackwood first, extending his hand with practiced charm. Mr. Blackwood, pleasure to finally meet you in person. I've been looking forward to finalizing this partnership. Mr. Adebayo. David's handshake was brief. Please have a seat. Cunnel settled into a chair, Laura positioning herself beside him like an accessory. He still hadn't seen Morenike at the far end of the table, or if he hadn't registered her presence as significant. I appreciate everyone's time today, Cunnel began, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone who believed he controlled the room. I know there were some minor administrative delays with the approval documentation, but I'm confident we can resolve those quickly and move forward. My construction team is ready to break ground next week. Mr. Adebayo, David Blackwood interrupted gently. Before we proceed, I'd like to introduce you to someone, though I believe you're already acquainted. He gestured toward Morenike. Cunnel's head turned. His eyes found her. And Morenike watched in real time as every assumption he'd made about this meeting, about this deal, about his future, shattered across his face. The color drained from his skin. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Dr. Morenike Adebayo, David continued, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Our designated oversight authority for the Nigerian Infrastructure Initiative. She holds final approval authority for all funding disbursements per the 2020 protocols that you signed and agreed to. Laura looked confused, glancing between Cunnel and Morenike. Wait, what? Cunnel, who is she? My wife, Cunnel whispered. Then, louder, with anger bleeding through shock. My ex-wife. What is this? What is she doing here? Dr. Adebayo is here in her professional capacity, Jennifer said calmly. She's been the designated compliance officer for your contract from the beginning. It's clearly stated in Section 7 of the agreement you signed. Cunnel's hands gripped the edge of the table. This is a conflict of interest. She can't be objective. We're getting divorced. She's obviously going to sabotage this out of spite. Actually, Morenike said, speaking for the first time, her voice steady and clear. I'm going to block this deal because it's fraudulent. The word hung in the air like a detonation. Cunnel shot to his feet. That's insane. That's defamation. I will sue you for every word. Sit down, Mr. Adebayo. David Blackwood's voice carried steel. Dr. Adebayo has prepared a comprehensive compliance review. I suggest you listen. Morenike opened her laptop, and the large screen on the wall behind her lit up with her findings. Company names, registration dates, budget discrepancies. A web of fraud laid out in irrefutable detail. 9 of your 27 subcontractors were incorporated within the past year, she began. 6 have residential addresses. 4 have directors with histories of contract fraud or ethical violations. Your primary construction management firm, Prestige Infrastructure Limited, is run by a man who is sanctioned for misrepresentation and diverted funds on a government project 18 months ago. Connell's jaw worked silently. Laura had gone very still. Your budget projections inflate actual market costs by 30 to 50% across every major category, Morenike continued, advancing to the next slide. Cement, steel, labor, equipment, all systematically marked up to create hidden profit pools that would be funneled through these shell companies back to you. This is speculation, Connell managed. You're making assumptions. I have documentation. Morenike's voice never rose. Corporate Affairs Commission records. Professional sanction notices. Market rate comparisons from 3 independent construction cost analysts. I've also identified what would happen if this project moved forward as structured. Substandard materials in the community center would create structural failures within 18 months. The affordable housing units would violate multiple safety codes. The job training programs exist only on paper with no actual curriculum or qualified instructors. She advanced to the final slide. Photos of a collapsed building in River State, victims being pulled from rubble, grieving families. This is what happened the last time Chidi Okonkwo managed a construction project.
4 people died.
17 were injured. And you've given him 42 million naira to do it again. The room was silent. Even the lawyers had stopped taking notes. Connell's hands were shaking. I didn't know about his history. The vetting was supposed to. You did no vetting, Morenike said quietly. You selected companies that would inflate costs and kick back profits. You structured this entire deal as a theft operation disguised as community development. That's not. I would never. But Connell's protests died as he looked around the table and saw no sympathy, only judgment. David Blackwood leaned forward. Mr. Adebayo, Blackwood International takes our reputation and our community commitments seriously. We do not fund fraud.
Dr.
Adebayo's findings will be submitted to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Your contract is voided effective immediately. You have 30 days to return the 2 million naira advance, plus the 1 million in damages specified in the termination clause. 3 million naira.
Connell didn't have it.
He'd spent it all on cars and jewelry, and the woman sitting beside him, who was now slowly sliding her chair away from his. Morenike. Connell's voice broke.
Please.
We can fix this. We can restructure. I'll remove those contractors. I'll adjust the budgets. Please don't do this. You threw me out of my home, Morenike said softly. You called my work meaningless. You celebrated my absence. And all of that, I could forgive. But you were about to steal money meant to help people. You were about to build unsafe structures that could have killed families. That, I can't forgive. Connell slumped in his chair, a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Laura stood abruptly. I need to go. I have another appointment. She left without looking back, her heels clicking rapidly toward the elevator. Morenike closed her laptop. I'm recommending Blackwood restructure this project with qualified contractors and proper community oversight. The infrastructure is still needed. The investment can still do good. Just not with you. She stood, gathered her things, and walked toward the door. As she passed Connell, he looked up at her with something close to desperation. I loved you, he whispered. No, Morenike said gently. You didn't. But maybe someday you'll understand what you lost. She walked out of the boardroom into sunlight, finally free. 3 months after the boardroom, Morenike stood at a construction site in the Jefferson district, wearing a hard hat and safety vest that had her name embroidered on the pocket. Dr. M. Adebayo, Project Oversight Director. The community center's foundation was being poured by a legitimate construction firm with actual credentials, actual insurance, and actual concern for building something that wouldn't collapse on the people it was meant to serve. David Blackwood had called her the day after Connell's contract was voided. "We still want to do this project," he'd said. "But we want to do it right. Would you consider taking a leadership role? Full oversight authority, proper compensation, and genuine partnership."
She'd said yes.
Not for revenge, not to prove anything to Connell, but because the community deserved what had been promised to them: safe housing, job training, infrastructure that would last. The new budget was leaner, more honest. 60 million naira instead of 95, with actual market rate allocations and transparent contractor selection. 20 million was designated for community programming that Morenike would personally oversee. Real job training with certified instructors. Real small business grants with accountability measures. Real impact instead of Instagram posts. Jennifer approached across the construction site, clipboard in hand. The affordable housing units are ahead of schedule. The contractors say they've never worked on a project with this level of community engagement before. That's because most projects don't actually care about the community, Morenike said. They care about the profit margin. Speaking of which, Jennifer's expression shifted, uncomfortable. Connell defaulted on the repayment. He didn't have the 3 million. Blackwood's legal team is pursuing collections, but his assets are all leveraged or tied up in loans. The G-Wagon was repossessed last week. Morenike felt nothing.
No satisfaction, no pity.
Just the neutral observation of natural consequences playing out. And Lara? She wasn't sure why she asked. Engaged to someone else. A politician in Lagos. Moved on within 3 weeks. Jennifer shook her head. Some people only love the lifestyle, never the person. They walked through the site, Morenike stopping to talk with workers, asking about safety protocols, listening to concerns about material quality. This was the work Connell had dismissed as meaningless. This attention to detail, this care for people, this insistence that success meant more than personal profit. Her phone buzzed. An email from the Nigerian Women in Development Leadership Forum. An invitation to speak at their annual conference about ethical oversight in infrastructure projects. Her third speaking invitation this month. Word had spread about what she'd done, how she'd stopped a fraudulent deal despite personal cost. People were calling her courageous. She just called it necessary. That evening, Morenike returned to her mother's bungalow. She could afford something bigger now, something closer to what she'd lost when Connell threw her out.
But this small house felt right. Honest. Hers.
She made dinner, simple jollof rice and plantains, and ate alone at the small table where she discovered the truth that changed everything. Her laptop sat nearby, showing the preliminary designs for the community center. A space for children's programs, adult education, health services, job placement support. Everything a community needed to actually thrive. Someone knocked at the door. Morenike looked through the window cautiously. Connell stood on her porch, looking smaller than she remembered. No expensive suit tonight. Just jeans and a simple shirt.
No Rolex. No swagger.
Just a man who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out how to carry the weight of his own choices. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Morenike. His voice was rough, tired. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserve to hear it." She waited. "You were right," he continued. "About everything. The contractors, the fraud, the shortcuts. I got so caught up in looking successful that I stopped caring about actually being good. And I treated you like you were nothing when you were everything. I know. I've lost the business. The house is in foreclosure. Lara's gone. My reputation is destroyed. And the worst part isn't any of that. The worst part is knowing I did this to myself. I threw away the only person who actually cared about me, who actually wanted me to be better." Morenike leaned against the doorframe. Colonel, I didn't destroy you. I stopped you from destroying other people. There's a difference. I know. And that's why I'm here. Not to ask for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it, but to tell you that I see you now. I see what you built, what you're building. I see your integrity and your strength, and everything I was too blind to value. You're doing what I should have been doing all along, actually helping people. Yes, I am. Can I ask you something? His eyes were red, maybe from crying, maybe from exhaustion. How did you do it? How did you walk away from me, from the life we built, from everything, and still land on your feet? Morenike considered the question. I didn't walk away, Colonel. You threw me out. But here's what you never understood. I wasn't standing on your foundation. I built my own. You just never bothered to look down and see it. He nodded slowly. I'm going to try to be better. I got a job with a construction company in Port Harcourt. Entry-level project coordinator. It's honest work. I'm learning to build things that actually matter instead of just building my image. Good. That's good. Will you ever forgive me? Morenike thought about it, about the trash bags and the hotel room and the public humiliation. About Lara's smile and Colonel's cruelty and the way he discarded 22 years like they meant nothing. But she also thought about the freedom that came after. The clarity, the ability to finally build something entirely her own. I already have, she said. Not for you. For me. Because carrying anger would only slow me down, and I have too much work to do. Colonel's eyes filled. Thank you. But, Colonel, we're done. Completely done. I'm not your wife anymore. I'm not your oversight authority. I'm just someone you used to know who hopes you actually learn something from all this. I understand. He backed away from the door. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. She watched him walk to a beat-up Honda that had replaced the G-Wagon, watched him drive away into Abuja's evening traffic. Then she closed the door and returned to her dinner, to her designs, to her life. 6 months later, the community center opened. 200 people attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Children ran through the new space, their laughter echoing off walls built properly, safely, with care. Elderly residents toured the health clinic. Young adults signed up for job training programs. This was real. This was lasting. Morenike stood to the side, watching it all unfold, and felt her mother's presence, like a blessing. This was the legacy that mattered. Not the money Colonel had chased. Not the status Lara had performed. But the actual lives touched, the actual community strengthened, the actual difference made. David Blackwood found her in the crowd. 3 more cities want to replicate this model. They're asking for you specifically. Dr. Adebayo, you're building something bigger than one project. You're building a new standard. She smiled. My mother always said if you're going to do something, do it right or don't do it at all. She raised you well. She did. As the celebration continued, Morenike slipped away quietly, walking through the neighborhood her project was transforming. New housing going up. Small businesses opening. Hope replacing despair, slowly but surely.
Her phone rang.
An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Dr. Adebayo? This is Minister Adewale from the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing. We've been following your work on the Jefferson District project. We'd like to discuss bringing your oversight model to a national level. Would you be interested in consulting on our infrastructure initiatives? Would she be interested in taking everything she'd learned, everything she'd fought for, and scaling it across the entire country? In ensuring that development deals actually developed communities instead of just enriching contractors? Yes, Morenike said. I'm very interested. After the call ended, she stood on a street corner in a neighborhood that was being rebuilt the right way and thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago. Thrown out of her home. Dismissed as meaningless. Treated like garbage by the man who'd promised to love her forever. That woman had been devastated, but she hadn't been destroyed. Because Colonel had never understood the most important truth. You can't diminish someone whose value comes from within. You can't erase someone who's already built their own foundation. You can't throw away someone who knows exactly what they're worth. Morenike had always been powerful. She'd just finally stopped waiting for permission to use her power. The sun set over Abuja, painting the sky in golds and purples. Morenike walked home to her mother's bungalow, to the small, honest space where she discovered her strength and felt complete. Not because she'd gotten revenge on Kunal. Not because she'd won some competition, but because she'd stayed true to herself even when it cost her everything she thought she had. And in the end, that integrity had given her back something better. Not a marriage built on dismissal. Not a life built on someone else's vision, but a purpose built on truth, service, and the radical belief that doing right matters more than looking successful. Kunal had thrown away the gatekeeper, but Morenike had never needed his gate. She'd built her own door. And on the other side was a legacy that would outlast any Instagram post, any G-Wagon, any diamond Rolex. A legacy of truth, of dignity, of becoming exactly who she was always meant to be.